The moment my child realized the truth about us. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. Mom, why is our name on 2 leases? Jonah holds his phone like a ticket to a place I said didn't exist. The screen glows with a PDF thumbnail, lease_a townhouse signed. PDF, date stamped March 3rd, 9:17 p.m. The exact night I told him I had book club at the library. My stomach does a small, precise sink, like an elevator between floors. I make tea to stall, the kettle shrieking like I feel. We live in a 1-bedroom walk-up in Midtown, with radiator hisses and a view of a brick wall. I work the early shift at a clinic, which means I color-code schedules and clean up truths the way other people wipe counters. I believe in protection as a verb, in filtering fear through gauze so it stings less going in. It's complicated, I say, which feels like an apology and a challenge. Then uncomplicated, he says, the shadow of Daniel's wording on my child's mouth. The second lease is real. So is the reason I didn't tell him. The Aurora townhouse belongs to Daniel's image. White cabinets, strategic throw blankets, a bowl of limes untouched. When we separated, we agreed on age-appropriate truth. I thought it meant choosing which windows to open. Daniel thought it meant boarding up the doors and painting the plywood sky blue. The lease sits on my phone, too, along with email chains and a second calendar labeled errands. I open it and see my own breadcrumbs. Bank appointment, county records, parent-teacher meeting, all arranged like I wanted to prove something to myself first. Jonah taps the lease and zooms to the signature. Mara Velasquez, guarantor. Why would you sign for Dad's place, he asks. My mouth says stability. My heart says insurance. My files say leverage. In the kettle's steam, I see the hallway of a courthouse I've walked twice, and a door marked records that smells like dust and lemon cleaner. I also see Ms. Patel's office, warm lamp, 2 chairs, tissue box no one touches until they do. This will make sense. I promise, a sentence that has historically preceded disaster in our family. Jonah doesn't blink. When do I get the version without training wheels? He asks. I think, today? I say, soon. He whispers, steady and terrible. How soon is soon, Mom? If you don't tell me now, I'll ask Dad tonight. Before there were leases and whispered deadlines, there was just us. A small square table, brushed aluminum lamp, shore magnets that never stuck. Jonah's Sunday night grilled cheese ritual, my Monday morning scrubs. We had rules. Phones away at dinner, no secrets that impact safety, no scary movies after 9 p.m. I kept the soft parts soft. I called debt a plan we're working on. I called the custody calendar a grown-up calendar. I called Daniel's disappearances bad timing. He called them consults. Daniel has a way of giving a truth a haircut, so you barely recognize it. At a birthday last fall, he clinked a glass to say co-parenting was a team sport and suggested I'd get there, with time, as if honesty were a gym you join. He's charming in a way that smells like new leather. One night in January, I heard Jonah repeating Daniel's jokes about optimizing narratives. He was practicing for a class presentation and asked if omission was the same as lying. I said sometimes it's kindness. He asked, to whom? That question sat under our table like a third chair. Aunt Rosa, who never buys lemons unless she's making lemonade right that minute, warned me. Mija, open the window before the house smells like gas. I adjusted curtains instead. At Ms. Patel's office, I explained our stability policy, how we share information in layers. Ms. Patel smiled like someone holding scissors. Layers are good, she said. But children feel drafts before adults do. I laughed politely. I didn't sleep that night. When Daniel dropped Jonah off last week, he said, let's not involve him in grown-up logistics, and then handed Jonah a glossier version of the custody calendar labeled Adventure Days. Yesterday, Jonah noticed the dates didn't match mine. Who moved Thursday, he asked. Paperwork, I said. Which paperwork? The question will come back to me with a screenshot and a timestamp. The first ripples looked like nothing. A call from a number with no name at 10:41 p.m. A duplicate Uber charge, a signature on a school field trip consent form that slanted left instead of right. You're reading tea leaves, Daniel said, palming my shoulder with a smile. But tea leaves, when you line them up by date, start spelling things. February 12th. Voicemail from Fairbrook Bank saying my guarantor status required an updated income letter. February 13th. Daniel texting that his phone died, which is why he missed Jonah's robotics meet, while his Instagram showed a story tagged at Aurora Sunset. February 15th. Jonah's PE teacher emailed that he'd forgotten sneakers 3 times in a row. Jonah never forgets hardware. I'll fix it, Daniel replied, all light and brisk, like a hosting note. I told myself, post-divorce flail, not a scheme. I told myself, maybe he needs a guarantor because co-signers are normal in this economy. And who am I to lecture anyone about rent? I told myself, the extra phone in Daniel's console, the one that pinged when mine didn't, must be for work. But when I signed the Aurora paperwork months ago, the leasing agent looked at my W-2 and asked, kindly, are you sure? I stood there feeling like a translator for a language I didn't believe in. He gave me a folder that I tucked behind our cereal, as if the cardboard could absorb guilt. Jonah knocked it loose last night reaching for granola, and there it was, utilities deposit confirmation, Daniel. The amount was circled in green pen, not my color. I put the folder back. This morning, Ms. Patel called to schedule a family check-in for Thursday at 3:15 p.m. Her tone neutral, like a waiting room. Nothing urgent, she said. Just alignment. The word twinged. Rosa texted a photo of her basil plant with the caption, the leaves curl when the soil hides salt. I typed and erased replies. I printed my bank statements and highlighted charges. County clerk $14 on March 1st. Notary $20 on February 27th. Aurora HOA dues $225 on March 5th. Why HOA if it's a rental? Hey Mom, Jonah asked after school. What's an HOA if the house isn't ours? He will find the answer before I can invent a softer version. Escalation didn't announce itself. It tiptoed in wearing Daniel's good cologne. Last Friday, Jonah got flagged for disruptive questioning in social studies. He asked 3 times why primary sources sometimes contradict the textbook. Ms. Patel said, he's curious in a way that makes adults nervous, and I felt both proud and exposed. That night, Daniel led Grace at Aunt Rose's birthday dinner, all polished vowels, and toasted, our aligned family. 15 minutes later, Jonah's phone buzzed with a Venmo request from Aurora HOA for $225, same as the charge on my statement. Caption, community dues, late. Jonah angled his screen to me. Daniel laughed, spam, too quickly. I started to map the nights. March 3rd, lease signed. March 5th, HOA dues. March 6th, Jonah's sneakers missing because he slept at Daniel's and returned half-packed. There's a pattern, and it's wearing a sweater I've washed. I asked Daniel, privately, if he was behind on anything important. I'm offended, he said, as if the emotion were a bill I had sent him. Are you okay? I countered. We're fine, he said, and kissed Jonah's hair. On the subway home, Jonah said, I thought we don't pretend. The word we knifed a little. At 10 p.m., I got an email, guarantor reminder, insurance proof needed. I stared at the subject line until the letters unhooked. Saturday morning, Daniel texted, let's keep finance stuff off Jonah's plate. He's 13. At noon, Jonah asked me to explain what a guarantor can lose. I pulled up a bank site and explained calmly that if a tenant defaults, a guarantor pays. If the tenant lies, the guarantor is now a witness. He didn't look scared. He looked focused. So your name is really on it, he said. Yes, I said. Why, he asked. Because there are some games where the only way to stop the bleeding is to grab the blade, I said, and watched him process metaphors like calculus. And which game are we playing? He asked. I told him he had a dentist appointment Monday at 4. I watched him clock the deflection and file it like a new syllable. Sunday night became the fracture line. Jonah wanted clarity. I wanted to set the table. We tell age-appropriate truth, I said, tucking my hair like a rule. Age-appropriate for whom? He asked. Aunt Rosa arrived with flan and that face she makes when she smells smoke long before anyone else. She listened as Jonah presented his question list. Why 2 calendars? Why 2 leases? Why an HOA invoice in Dad's Notes app? Why did Mom sign? Rosa put the flan down like a paperweight on denial. You can't baby-proof reality, she said gently. Daniel showed up late, charming and scented, with reusable grocery bags as if moral choices came in organic cotton. We need unity, he said, eyes on me, not on Jonah. We need truth, Jonah said, eyes on both of us. Daniel put an arm around Jonah and told him grown-up things are complicated. Jonah slid out of the arm like water, sat, and opened his laptop. He had a folder on his desktop labeled house stuff, and inside were screenshots of the Venmo request, my HOA charge, a Google Maps timeline that showed Daniel in Aurora at 9:20 p.m. while texting me, heading home. There was also a photo he'd taken when Daniel left him briefly in the car, a glove compartment open, a second phone face down, a postcard from the Concord Fellowship with a logo like a lantern. What is this? Jonah asked, tapping the lantern. Daniel said, nothing too fast. I watched the mask shift, the way it does when he is both surprised and calculating. I heard myself say, a club, which is not wrong and not right. Rosa said, who signed your membership dues? Jonah scrolled. He had metadata. He had timestamps. He had the calm of a person who trusts what clocks do. Tell me one thing that is entirely true, he said. I said, I signed the lease to keep you from being moved around without warning. Daniel said, that's not how I remember it. And the room cooled by 10 degrees. Rosa folded her arms like a safety bar. Memory is not a ledger, she said. Receipts are. Jonah reaches into his backpack and pulls out an envelope from the county clerk. Someone mailed this to me, Jonah says, handing over a manila envelope addressed in block letters to our apartment. Inside, a photocopy of a deed transfer from 2 years ago, a name I don't recognize, Mariah Cole, and our last name in a tiny corner as guarantor of emergency expenses, a line I've never seen on a deed before. It's not a deed, Rosa points out. It's a lien notice attached to Daniel's signature and a stamped date, June 14th, 8:42 a.m. The morning Jonah had a fever and I missed work. I hear all the clocks we've ignored start chiming at once. Daniel attempts a smile. Scammers, he says, palms up. Jonah is too still. I ask to speak to Daniel in the hall. We fix this, I say. You show me everything tonight. He leans close, cologne and winter air, and says, you love drama. I love proof, I say. Same thing for you, he snips. My phone buzzes, MS. Patel confirming Thursday, subject line family check-in, agenda items, with bullet points, communication protocols, overlapping narratives, logistics transparency. The phrase overlapping narratives feels like a velvet rope. Back in the kitchen, Jonah opens photos to a picture of Daniel and a woman at a ribbon cutting with the Concord Fellowship banner behind them. Date, May 28th, 2:14 p.m. Captioned by the venue. Welcome to the Aurora Learning Collective. Underneath, a tag at Colette projects. I am the adult. I say, we will figure this out. Jonah says, you keep promising future verbs. He is not wrong. Rosa picks up her coat. Tomorrow morning, she says, we go to the bank and the county records. Bring IDs. Daniel laughs softly. You can't stroll into systems like it's a farmer's market. Rosa says, watch me. Jonah asks if we can save the flan for after we find 3 facts in a row. Yes, I say, while texting an alarm for 8:15 a.m. Titled, Bank, Records, Proof. At midnight, when the apartment quiets, I search my email for Concord Fellowship dues and feel my pulse spike when a receipt surfaces, charged to a card that isn't mine but lists my address for billing. I click the PDF and see the line, Family Tier, Automatic Renewal. I stare until it burns in reverse on my eyelids when I blink. At 1:03 a.m., the second phone number calls, and I finally answer it. A woman's voice, steady like an HR script. Ms. Velasquez? This is Talia from Fairbrook Bank's risk team. She confirms my identity before I can deny it. We're reviewing guarantor exposure on Aurora Townhouse, she says, and a pattern of cash advances from a connected account. I sit up in the dark so fast the room sways. I'm not the tenant, I say. You're the guarantor of record, she replies, and reads the amounts like she's tightening a cap. $1,500 on March 10th, $2,000 on March 15th, $3,500 on March 20th. Those are credit card cash advances, she says. The fee structure escalates. Her voice softens. It's not typical in stable situations. I ask for copies. She says she'll email, and she does. 3 PDFs with timestamps, and a fourth, a screenshot of a text they received from the tenant authorizing family coordination. The number matches Daniel's second phone. I forward everything to myself, to Rosa, and, after a pause, to Ms. Patel, subject line, documentation for Thursday. Sleep doesn't come. Morning is a seam ripper. At Fairbrook, we sit in chairs meant for people who don't spill coffee. Talia meets us with a binder and a pen that clicks too loudly. We also found a guarantor cross-reference, she says, sliding a page over. On it, my name linked to Aurora Learning Collective under Community Partner, with the Concord Fellowship as sponsor. I did not sign that. It's not my signature. The M in Mara is wrong. It has a high swoop. Mine is blocky. Talia circles it. Mismatched signature, she says. We'll open an internal review. Rosa whispers, bless the clerical gods. At the county records office, the clerk pulls microfilm with the kind of patience you only see from people who know paper will outlast us all. She prints the lien notice Jonah found, plus 6 more associated filings. I feel my face go hot cold hot reading the names. Concord Family Fund, Mariah Cole, Velasquez, Emergency Support Agreement. In the margins, Daniel's initials. The clerk points to a form number. If you believe a document was filed with an unauthorized signature, you can submit a statement of denial, she says. It doesn't erase it, but it starts a correction. On the sidewalk, Jonah says nothing. He takes photos of everything and names them properly. You're building a case, I say. I'm building the truth, he answers. Rosa's phone vibrates with a message preview that collapses all my doable plans. Message from a number we don't know. Fellowship reminds members to remain unified. Discipline committee meets Friday. There's a lantern emoji and a location pin at a church basement I've passed 1,000 times. Rosa reads it twice, eyebrows climbing. They sent this to me, she says. How did they get my number? My stomach answers before my brain. Daniel. He's looped family into a structure that thinks it's love and bills like a subscription. We sit in the car and breathe winter air through the vents. Jonah says, so it's not just a house, it's a group. Back home, I comb the Aurora Learning Collective site, which looks harmless. Laptops, smiling tutors, bright murals. The fine print shows partnership with the Concord Fellowship, which offers character formation and unity agreements. A PDF lists dues tiers and sponsorship obligations, including emergency support pledges signed by a family guarantor. The example signature looks exactly like the fake M on my file. My chest thunders. The what is clear now: a shadow account, automatic dues, cash advances feeding a community that sells itself as a compass. The why is a blank I don't want filled. Ego, loneliness, control? Jonah asks, do they make you lie? I say, they make lying feel like service. We lay out papers across our table like tiles. Bank statements, lien notices, HOA requests, the fellowship flyer. Jonah builds a timeline, index cards in 3 columns. House, fellowship, school. He connects them with string. Yes, actual string Rosa keeps for herbs. March dates cluster like bruises. May has the ribbon-cutting photo. Jonah writes, when does protection become a lie? On a sticky note, and slaps it in the middle. Rosa says, tomorrow, we talk to a lawyer, and pulls a card from her wallet. Patel and Boone, family law. Different Patel, she grins. I text Daniel, we need to meet. Full transparency. No spin. He replies with a thumbs up and a calendar invite titled Unity Discussion at the Aurora Townhouse, 6:30 p.m. Pot roast emoji. Jonah looks at me. I want to come, he says. I'm torn between bubble wrap and battlefield. You'll be safe, I say, and realize that safety, for once, means seeing everything. On the invite's guest list, a new name appears. Mariah Cole has accepted. The plan forms itself because chaos hates a clipboard. I scan and label every document. 01_Fairbrook_advances. PDF 02_lien_notice_June 14. PDF 03_signature_mismatch_comparison. JPG 04_fellowship_dues_tier. PDF 05_HOA_request_screenshot. PNG. I record a voicemail Daniel left yesterday. Let's not weaponize paperwork, Mara. I email Ms. Patel the timeline and ask her to sit in at Thursday's meeting as a support, and she agrees. Careful to note her role isn't legal, documentation-oriented, she says, and to keep Jonah centered. Rosa prints a statement of denial form for the county and sticks it under a magnet shaped like a chili pepper. We practice phrases so I don't default to soft edges. I reject being listed as guarantor. I did not authorize automatic dues. Our son's stability is non-negotiable. At lunch, Jonas says, if he's lying to you, he's lying to me. And I feel a seam pop in the story I've used to tuck him in. We reveal this in a place with witnesses, I say. Not at a dinner table that smells like pot roast. Rosa snorts. We are not arguing under a soup ladle. We decide. First, lawyer's office on Wednesday for advice. Then, Thursday at school, where there is a glass wall and a calendar and Ms. Patel's tidy printer. I text Daniel a change. Let's meet at school Thursday, 3:15, neutral ground. He sends a calendar decline and a new invite. Family dinner. Reunification. The word reunification makes my spine arch. I respond. We will attend school meeting. Council suggests public setting. I call Patel and Boone. The receptionist says Boone can see us Wednesday at 10 a.m. I gather my courage in a Ziploc. Jonah sits cross-legged on the carpet, sorting index cards into beliefs and facts. He holds one up. Mom signed lease to control chaos. Belief or fact, he asks. Both, I whisper. I print the county form, fill my name in block letters, and leave the signature line blank for Wednesday. The printer coughs like a nervous witness. I rehearse how to say to Daniel, I will not sponsor your second life. I rehearse how to say to Jonah, I should have trusted your eyes sooner. At 6:02 p.m., Daniel texts, if you bring outsiders, the fellowship will escalate this. Dinner at Rosa's becomes the close call. Daniel arrives with flowers and a story. He sets his phone face down, the way he always does when a truth tries to surface. Let's not make school a stage, he says, buttering bread like diplomacy. Rosa places the butter knife down carefully. We like stages with lights, she replies. They keep hands visible. Jonah sits opposite Daniel, chin up, hands folded, a Boy Scout at the end of a badge he earned without joy. I know about the fellowship, he says, voice flat. I know about the cash advances. I know about the lien. Daniel smiles like a magician who thinks the hat is still convincing. Buddy, that's not your business, he says. It's literally my house, Jonas says. And my mother's name. Daniel pivots to me. You dragged him into this, he accuses. He walked himself, Rosa says. The air trembles. Daniel slides a manila envelope across the table. So clean, so Daniel. And says, here's everything. No need to dramatize. Inside, a fellowship pamphlet, a glowing brochure for the Learning Collective, a spreadsheet titled Community Support, with my name listed under Family Tier. It doesn't include the advances, or the lien, or the signature mismatch. Partial truth is the most dangerous lie, Rosa murmurs. We can explain at school, Daniel counters, voice dropping to a silky threat. Or, he says, we do this now and keep it private. Jonah says, private like the second phone. I almost cave. The familiar gravity of keeping a family together by becoming a black hole tugs at me. Daniel reads my face, leans in. Unity, Mara, he says, warm as wool. Then Rosa squeezes my knee, a small earthquake back toward myself. I stand. Thursday, 3:15, school, I say. Daniel's jaw ticks. If you humiliate me, he says, there will be consequences. Jonah inhales like he's stepping into cold water. For who, he asks. Daniel doesn't answer. Rosa lifts her glass and says, to truth with witnesses, as Daniel's smile finally slips. The trap isn't a trap if the door is clearly labeled. Wednesday, Boone reviews our files with a pen that bleeds blue. 2 tracks, he says. 1. File the statement of denial for the county. Alert the bank's fraud unit. Freeze your exposure. 2. Adjust custody terms to protect Jonah from financial entanglement and group coercion. He uses words like coercive control and third-party obligations and makes them feel like things you can staple. Do not confront at the fellowship, he warns. Control the venue. He drafts a brief letter to Daniel. Cease and desist listing Ms. Velasquez as guarantor. All future commitments require her explicit, notarized consent. He suggests the school meeting include a bank representative by phone. I email Talia. She agrees to dial in. Thursday arrives like a courtroom on wheels. MS. Patel arranges chairs in her office. Glass wall, soft lamp, tissue box. Jonah sits beside me, knees touching mine. Rosa positions herself by the door like a friend-shaped bouncer. Daniel walks in with Mariah, whose smile is brittle and brave. "We're here for unity," Daniel says. Ms. Patel nods. "We're here for clarity." I breathe, reach for the first document, and set 03_signature_mismatch_comparison. JPG on the table. "This is not my signature," I say. "It was used to list me as guarantor for fellowship dues and a learning collective partnership." Daniel opens his mouth. Ms. Patel lifts a hand. "We'll proceed one document at a time." I slide over the bank statement. The speakerphone lights up and Talia's voice fills the room, professional, crisp. "We've identified cash advances tied to the Aurora account and a number linked to Mr. Velasquez," she says. "We are freezing that line pending verification." Mariah whispers to Daniel, "You said this was handled." Jonah inhales sharply, then steadies. Boone's letter sits in a plastic sleeve. Ms. Patel reads a line aloud. "Minors must not be leveraged in financial or ideological commitments." She meets Daniel's gaze. "Our focus is Jonah's stability." Daniel reaches for the pamphlet, knocks over his water, and finally, loudly, begins to lie. "It's not a cult," Daniel says, water spreading like an ink blot between us. "It's community." He talks about unity dues as investments, about character formation as mentorship, about the learning collective as a scholarship pipeline. He's practiced this. The sentences come pre-laminated. Ms. Patel isn't impressed by lamination. "What are the financial obligations?" she asks. Mariah looks at the ceiling tiles. I slide forward the dues PDF with the lantern logo. "Family tier, automatic renewal." Jonah reads aloud. "Penalty for disunity acts," Rosa adds, pointing at a line item, "discipline contributions." Talia's voiceover speaker. "We also flagged an attempt to add Ms. Velasquez's address to a new credit instrument yesterday at 11:04 p.m. Jonah looks at me, then Daniel. "You tried last night," he says. Daniel's mask cracks at the edges, old paint over damp wall. "I did what I had to do to keep doors open for you," he tells Jonah, a statement that has never once included consent. Mariah finally speaks, soft and urgent. "They promised the collective would place kids into STEM academies," she says. "We needed it to look like a family unit." She looks at me with something like apology. "They said a mother's name helps." It lands. I feel shame and rage take turns behind my eyes. "You used mine without asking," I say. "You used him," Rosa says, nodding at Jonah. Ms. Patel leans in. "We will set boundaries now," she says. "No automatic pledges, no guarantor status, no fellowship contact with Jonah outside scheduled, supervised contexts." Boone's letter is passed around. Daniel refuses to touch it. "You're making me the villain," he says, and in that flicker I see it. The addiction to being admired, the fear of being ordinary, the willingness to mortgage trust for applause. "You did that by yourself," Jonah says, voice clear. MS. Patel summarizes, "Bank will freeze, county will get denial, custody terms propose no financial exposure." Daniel's eyes flash, not with remorse, but with calculation. He smiles at Jonah and says, "But tell them you still want both houses, son." Fallout doesn't wait, it backhands. Fairbrook freezes the line and sends a fraud packet by courier. The county clerk accepts my statement of denial with a neutral nod and a stamp that feels like a small hallelujah. Boone files a petition to modify custody to include financial boundaries and prohibits ideological commitments that create monetary obligations. Ms. Patel emails a summary, clarity achieved, ongoing monitoring recommended. Daniel's texts arrive in waves. "You made a spectacle. You humiliated me. You broke unity." The fellowship sends a discipline notice to an email I didn't authorize, threatening community consequences if defamation continues. Rosa prints it, writes across the top in red pen, "Nope," and hands it to Boone. Jonah is quieter. He still eats cereal and asks about homework, but the air around his questions has a new gravity. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asks. "Because I thought protecting you meant editing reality," I say. "I underestimated your spine." He nods, and it's a nod that says I needed you to trust me. My job calls about my absence. I explain as little as possible and as much as necessary. Supervisor says, "Take tomorrow. Bring paperwork if HR needs it." I thank her and cry in the bathroom for 90 seconds. Timer set. Daniel posts a photo of himself at a park with a caption about resilience and family first, tagging the Learning Collective. Comments bloom like kudzu. Jonah sees it and swallows hard. He's performing me, he says. I say, he's performing to himself. That night, we sign a new nightly ritual. Open questions at the table, 3 honest answers, no softening nouns. Rosa brings the flan, finally, and we eat it cold standing up. My phone blinks with Boone's update. The judge has set a hearing date. Temporary orders include no new financial instruments in child's household without both parents sign consent. I breathe for the first time all week. Then Jonah asks, if the fellowship calls me, should I pick up anyway? Healing is not linear. It's a public transit map at rush hour. We start therapy with Ms. Patel's referral, a clinician who lets silence be a tool. Jonah sets terms. No metaphors until I ask, he says, and the therapist nods. We draft new routines like scaffolding, Sunday grocery list together, Monday night, calendars open, half hour. Thursday, what changed check-in. I put boundaries in writing and tape them to the fridge. No second phones. No automatic anything. All signatures verified at a bank or courthouse. I text Daniel our agreed-upon boundaries and attach Boone's letter each time. He replies with "we'll see," or "not at all." The fellowship emails twice. Boone CCs law enforcement on the second response, and they stop. At school, Jonah asks Ms. Patel if he can present his primary sources project on receipts and narratives, and she says yes with pride that doesn't drape itself over him. At home, he practices, shows the audience a photo, then metadata, a text, then the timestamp, a claim, then the bank record. He never says his father's name. He doesn't have to. Rosa watches and claps once hard. You built a spine out of dates, she says. I make caldo, and we measure cumin together. No future verbs, Jonah jokes. I laugh and hand him the spoon. I remove myself from the Aurora lease formally. Fairbrook confirms I'm off the guarantor roll. The relief is a quiet room after a long alarm. I file a police report for the forged signature. The officer is kind and bored, which is ideal. Daniel sends a photo of the townhouse couch with a caption, "Sometimes we fall." No mention of who catches whom. I stop checking his feet. I water Rosa's basil and think about what family is when the spin stops. It's not love if it requires a mask, Jonah says, and I realize he's quoting Ms. Patel and also himself. On Friday night, Daniel knocks on our door and asks to come in alone. He stands in the hall holding nothing for the first time in years. No flowers, no envelopes, no story that needs a stage. I'm not good at being ordinary, he says, voice small. I let him in because I believe in doors, but I keep the chain on because I believe in boundaries. Jonah sits at the table and decides, with a teenager's mercy, to stay. I won't join the fellowship, Daniel says quickly. I pause the dues. Jonah doesn't blink. Mom filed a report, he says. It's not just dues. Daniel nods, eyes shining like someone who learned to cry by watching movies. I know, he whispers. He looks at me. I'm sorry I used your name, he says, and the sentence lands, but doesn't undo. I'm moving out of Aurora, he adds. I'll send the release. I nod. We'll verify at the bank, I say. We sit in a triangle of quiet. He asks Jonah if they can still build the robot arm they planned. Jonah looks at me, then at Daniel. We can, but not at your house, he says. Here, or at school. In the open. Daniel nods again. He starts to say more. I stop him with a palm. No speeches, I say. Bring receipts. He manages a crooked smile. Fair. After he leaves, Jonah leans his head on my shoulder like when he was smaller. I hate that I had to learn this way, he says. I'm proud I learned it anyway, I answer. We write our own 2-line prayer on a sticky note and stick it to the fridge. Tell the truth with evidence. Protect the kid with daylight. The basil on the sill unfurls a new leaf. The judge's hearing is in 3 weeks. Our lives have a calendar we can see. I set the kettle and fold the manila envelopes away, not gone, just organized. Jonah picks up the spoon and tastes the broth. It needs salt, he says, and smiles because he knows he's right.